Hey, welcome back to the Mining Pod. On today's show, we're joined by Jaime Leverton, the former CEO of Hut 8, to talk about her time at Hut 8. So we go back in time to 2020 when she was appointed as CEO. We talk about the growth of the HODL there, growth of the hash rate, and then we talk about the merger of equals with US Bitcoin Corp and how she departed Hut 8 at the beginning of this year in February. Thank you to Jaime for joining the show, and thank you to Lee Bratcher and the entire North American Blockchain Summit NABS team for making this show possible. Before we jump into it, one note, this is an audio only show. So if you're watching on YouTube, sorry, no video. We had an issue with syncing the file. It happens during these live things, but the audio is nice and crisp. So you do have that. Thank you to Jaime for joining us. We go through all those things aforementioned. We also talk about her new role as chair of the board at Synteq, a Bitcoin mining and GPU broker firm in the space. We've had them on the show beforehand under their former name, Sunnyside Digital with Taras. So go back and listen to that show from May. And then lastly, we talk about her new company coming out, Stealth, which she is pretty bullish on. And I'd say I am too after talking with her about it. So that's the show. Go check it out after a few words from our sponsors.
Are you a retail or institutional investor interested in Bitcoin mining companies? The Miner Mag brings you free data and analysis from all major NASDAQ-listed Bitcoin mining operations to know who stands out. Check out visualized metrics and data-dependent stories at theminermag.com. Thanks for listening to The Mining Pod. Want more? Subscribe to our main feed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts for another weekly show on Bitcoin stocks. And check out our newsletter at miningpod.blockspace.media today.
Jaime, welcome to the Mining Pod. I think it's been 2.5 years. You probably didn't even remember the last time you were on.
I remember it was early days for me at Hut, right?
Yeah, and I think Sue might have been on.
After me.
Sue's been on quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who was on the show with you, someone else. But yeah, it was like right when we launched the show.
It would have had to have been Sue. I don't think I ever did a podcast with anyone but her.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Okay. Do you guys still keep in touch?
Well, except Amanda. Fabiano and I did Peter together. Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah. Amanda's great. She's coming up on her one year obligation to the show. She comes on like every January. So I'm about to cash that again. So Amanda,
you're going to cash that shit.
Yeah, I always do. I mean, she's like an advisor for us. So,
she's awesome.
She's the best. And like the puppet master behind the scenes too.
So good. Yeah, she was one of the first people in the space to reach out and welcome me when I got announced.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, she's been a great friend.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to dig into a ton of different things with Bitcoin mining. And I think like the thing for me that I find most interesting is the fact that US Bitcoin and Hut 8 had this merger, and then you left the scene a little bit later, and now you're like building this stealth company. So we got like this full tech CEO thing going on where you like have this whole like story. So I think in Bitcoin mining, we don't always get that because it's just like the same faces, the same conferences, the same things every time. But you have an interesting story here. So I want to dive into that and get like the whole story. Before we jump into it though, quick bio for those who are not super familiar.
Oh, sure. I have the luxury of age, so my bio is longer than most. I started my career at IBM in 2000 after I did my MBA with a concentration in marketing informatics, which is like the precursor to BI or big data, and spent 20 years in trad tech. So IBM for a decade, and then Bell Canada, BlackBerry, Cogeco Pier 1, eStructure, and National Bank in their capital markets group. And really the kind of the 10 years from when I left IBM to ultimately getting to Hut 8 in 2020, I really focused on transformation mandates. Mm-hmm. So I went to BlackBerry when BlackBerry was really at the bottom. So specializing in kind of fixing broken things or trying to. And I really carved out a niche in that I loved. But a lot of my time in trad tech was in infrastructure data centers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the Hut 8 appointment, was that 2020 or 2021?
2020. Okay. I got announced beginning of November.
Okay.
I think my first day was December 1st or December 2nd, 2020.
Okay.
And then my first hire was Sue Ennis. She was originally supposed to be part-time because we didn't have anyone for IR.
Yeah.
She was supposed to be part-time, and within 3 weeks, I'm like, no, I need you full-time.
Legendary hire.
Yeah, no, we had a really obviously good working relationship. We're still super close.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started.
Okay. And then now, which we will get to probably later in the show, onto different things, including the Synteq chair or board. Yeah,
I'm chair of the board of Synteq.
Yeah.
I'm on a couple of other boards. I'm doing some advisory work out of the Middle East. And then I am CEO and chair of a new startup in the fintech space.
Okay, you have time to do it all.
Oh, and I'm a mom of 3.
Just shoehorn that in there.
Yeah, they take up the most energy.
Nice. Okay, we'd start with the HUD 8 transition. I think the last time we had you on the show was within 6 months of you joining HUD 8.
So pre-NASDAQ even.
Yeah. It definitely was like spring 2021. It wasn't 2020. Might even been like summer 2021. But there's that. And then there's this whole history of HUD 8, which is accumulating a ton of Bitcoin, growing like all the other miners. And the question.
Yeah, we were the first public company ever to HODL was HUD.
And that was the question we kind of left HUD 8 with before the merger, was like, what are they going to do with all this Bitcoin? And there was tons of speculation, like all over Twitter. That's like the top of the last bull market towards like coming down a little bit. And then obviously the rest is history with the merger and the transition. What was walk us through time in that moment. Walk us through that.
Which point in time?
The HODL moment when you guys had the ton of Bitcoin. And
when we decided to HODL, it really was thinking about all of the effort that you put into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
To mine Bitcoin. And if you really believe in the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin, and you can hold your Bitcoin and spend fiat instead, because if you're in this space, you believe Bitcoin's going up and to the right and fiat is melting. So if you have an opportunity to make that trade, from my perspective, you make that trade all day long.
Yeah.
And the markets have gotten so much more sophisticated. I mean, we were the first at HUD to enter into an arrangement with Coinbase where we pledged our stack and took debt against it at a very attractive rate. In the bear market, when attractive rates were hard to find, we wanted non-dilutive financing, and so you're able to work the stack now in a way that just continues to justify that position. I mean, I was pulling the board numbers this morning, my board, which is all miners and Bitcoin proxies. MicroStrategy's up 600% year to date. Yeah. Bitcoin's up 100. Coinbase is up 114. The miner basket is up under 100. I mean, it just, that's the answer. A leverage play on Bitcoin is something the markets need. And why would you sell an asset that is going to be worth more over time and to just trade it for something that's going to be worth less?
Where did it click for you? Because you come back from a different world than Bitcoin, right? So like,
I rabbit holed in 2017 in that run when I was running Canada and Asia Pacific for a data center company, and our phone started ringing off the hook for people I'd never heard of looking for a megawatt of power, 2 megs of power, willing to pay cash. And I was like, what are these people doing? Yeah. Now there's 1,000 reasons why miners don't work in data centers, and obviously I know all about that. But that's when I really started to understand the space, and from then on was looking for the right way in, and ultimately that became HUD.
Okay, because that conviction play, different. Like you said, different. Okay, so then the next portion I think is this most interesting to me, because we were really covering US Bitcoin's rise. They were purchasing all this infrastructure across like the available inventory of the market at the time, which was quite high, with like Compute North falling apart and a bunch of other companies falling apart. And US Bitcoin's name kept popping up. They kept purchasing things over and over again. And people wondering like, how are they doing this? They're a private company. So what are they selling? Private equity in their own company to people? Are they doing debt? Like what's going on? And most of it seems to be debt. And so the question became, who's going to pay for all this? Because certainly they're not going to be able to make a bunch of revenue off of this infrastructure so quickly, especially during a bear market. And then there was like this natural thing came together with you guys. So walk us through the HODL US Bitcoin integration.
Yeah, I mean, the first M&A that we did was actually the data center play. Okay. So we were the first to start to pivot into data centers, kind of getting ahead of what we saw as the AI bubble.
Yeah.
So we bought the TerraGo assets and closed on that transaction in the beginning of 22. So very early. Mm-hmm. And then we started trading on the NASDAQ in June of 21, which gave us amazing liquidity. But as a Canadian domiciled company, we didn't have access to US indices, which is fine if you don't meet the other criteria for them.
Yeah.
But we became criteria eligible with the exception of where we were domiciled. Okay. So that became a focus area, looking for the right M&A transaction that allowed us to re-domicile the company to the US as well, so that we could start to get included in Russell 3000 initially, which hot rolled into the spring. And then Russell 2000 is available if you meet the criteria and have been on the 3000 for a year. Okay. So that becomes super, super important if you're trying to drive that liquidity, the auto buys, get into a different investor sphere. So that was an important thing we were looking for in a partner. We were also looking for people that really had operational excellence and geographic diversity, because we were all concentrated in Canada. Canada's been a challenge for the mining space, unfortunately. Alberta's amazing. Premier Smith has done just a fantastic job of keeping Alberta open to innovation and open to our space. But the rest of the country is almost locked down under mining moratoriums. So it was important for us to find a team that was really, really good operationally, that had that diversity of geography, which US BTC did in Niagara Falls, as well as obviously across Texas, and then at that time in Nebraska. So they really kind of met all of the criteria that we were looking for, and their strengths on the operational side where we really needed some help from a HUT perspective, and where HUT was incredibly strong, obviously capital markets, how we kind of had looked at our strategy, had built out our balance sheet really kind of second to none in the bear market.
Yeah.
So it was a really good synergy, and it kind of met the criteria of what we were looking for. And I think, I don't know how closely you watch, but the HUT's earnings were last week. Analysts are super bullish on kind of where they see the company. Like, it's starting to solidify the vision that we had going into it. Yeah. People are now starting to see the results of it and really understand the difference. I think in the last bull market, one of the things that happened was a lot of distraction on Exahash headlines.
Yeah.
Companies were being rewarded for putting up big future numbers.
Oh, so true. Yeah.
Which didn't actually translate to return on invested capital. It didn't translate to, profitability of the company. And I think in this cycle, now that we've got the spot ETFs approved in the US, there are other options for Bitcoin plays or proxy plays. Now that people are really starting to look at the operating metrics, looking at return on invested capital, looking at cash flow, looking at earnings per share. And that's what we wanted and needed to see in this space. And I think the team's incredibly well positioned now that discipline's coming around and being rewarded, frankly.
Today's show is brought to you by Digital Shovel. Digital Shovel is a leading manufacturer of modular mining pods as well as PDUs and switchgears. Unlike many other competitors, their product is designed and manufactured in North America with a complete UL inspection on the entire unit, not just individual components. Additionally, Digital Shovel is one of the most vertically integrated manufacturers of over 75,000 square feet of sheet metal shop, SMT and wave solder PCB assembly, as well as final assembly all under one roof in Toronto, Canada. Their price point leads the industry when compared to products with rates as low as $69,000 per megawatt for a complete data center with smart PDUs and switchgears. To learn more, visit digitalshovel.com.
I'm curious about the debt part. So US Bitcoin did have a lot of debt, and I don't know if it still has it. How did you guys manage that transaction? Was it like...
It was all equity.
It was all equity for US Bitcoin, or when the merger happened?
When the merger happened, it was a merger of equals, and it was just share swaps.
Okay. And then the debt moved on to a unified balance sheet.
Correct.
Along with, okay. And so then that just made all the outstanding obligations like okay, and whoever's eyes it was, because you guys had such an outstanding balance sheet beforehand.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So when you guys were looking at that, did that debt freak you guys out or not at all? Or you guys are like, we got all this HODL.
The beauty of a balance sheet like ours is you could really look for the best possible partner.
Yeah.
And as long as the consolidated balance sheet made sense, which it did, and the long-term strategy of the business overall was 1 + 1 = 3, which I absolutely believe to be the case. And I think we're seeing it now. That was the most important thing. We had been so disciplined, and we had done it to allow for the opportunity for the right transaction in the bear market. Yeah. Like really, I took a lot of heat, as I'm sure some of your viewers recall, when I did a raise in September of 21. I think I raised 172.5 million, something like that. Invested some in infrastructure, did the Terago transaction, but really made sure that the balance sheet was in as good a shape as possible, expecting the cycle. Yeah. If it was going to repeat the way it normally did, it was going to turn around that time, and it did. That's really when things started to get a little hairy in the market. And the only people doing transactions was US BTC, who picked up some good assets, and then ourselves in the merger that ultimately got access to those assets as well. There was really not a lot of activity.
Yeah. US Bitcoin,
and part of it was the balance sheet problem. Like you have to have a balance sheet robust enough that you can underwrite that M&A activity.
Okay. The transition out. So Asher and the rest of the US Bitcoin team came in as like different C-suite options. And then there was like a little bit of period. And then there was an announcement that you were going to transition out. Tell me about that. Because I feel like I'd never from the sidelines fully understood what the plan was there. Was there a plan initially? Did you want to leave? Like how, as much as like, obviously you can say on a show like this, but I'm interested in knowing like what occurred during that transition.
Well, when we decided to move the company, it really only made sense for headquarters to be in Miami. Yeah. The bulk of the US BTC team was already in Miami. We actually sublet Anthony Pompliano's office down there. Yeah. Pomp's a friend and obviously great guy. So that worked out super well. And I spent a lot of time looking at schools and houses. But ultimately, the decision for me was not to move to Miami. My kids are in high school and college, and it just I've got 3 daughters. It just wasn't the right transition. And the team being in Miami, I think, is critically important. Yeah, and their ability to execute, I completely believe in. So I think they were set up to be able to run the ball the rest of the way, and they've been doing a great job.
Okay, interesting. It's a very simple answer. I was looking not that I was looking for fishing or for something dramatic, but it was just.
I think people forget. Yeah. Decisions are really, really hard as a CEO, especially when there's family involved, and like there aren't a lot of mom CEOs in this space. Yeah. Actually, very few. But those are almost the biggest factors that go into a decision when you've got kids at home.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. My little one's in grade 9, so when we get her out of the house in a few years, then who knows? Yeah. But for now, we're really committed to Toronto and to Canada.
Okay. And what's your standing relationship with HODL now?
I was just a large shareholder.
Just a large shareholder.
Yeah.
Okay.
And an old friend. Like the rest of us. Just a bag holder. That's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would like to get closure on that side of the story. So that was interesting for me because, again, we covered it exhaustively forever. And sometimes you get the press release and you're like, what's going on here? Like, and you can't always ask questions because there's lawyers and SEC and all that. So interesting to get that a little bit later. How do you view HUT now? Like you're 10 months, 12 months out?
Yeah. It was February. So it'll be a year in February.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on HUT now, where they're at?
Well, obviously, I'm paying super close attention as a large shareholder. And I think the fact that I'm still a large shareholder should answer your question, not investment advice.
Yeah.
But I think they're incredibly well positioned. I think probably, look, I believe and I'm holding. I don't want to get in trouble with
no hand
my view of valuations, but I'm holding.
Okay. No, we're not trying to get any wrist slaps on the show, but
it's also weird. This is my first in-studio podcast since no longer being a public CEO. So it's funny. The old rules don't apply, but I really don't know the new ones either.
I haven't even thought about that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. What are there restrictions on what you can say as a former CEO and or as a large shareholder?
I don't know. That's why I'm just
at all
being super transparent. I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll be able to find out later. But
run it through you.
Just let me know. Let me know. We can yank the show. Okay, so Synteq, how did that come about?
Yeah. I mean, look, Taras is one of my favorite people in the space.
Yeah.
Similar to Amanda, and I can name the tons, but Taras is also in Toronto. I had the opportunity to meet Joe and Patty, who are based in Boston, and I spent quite a bit of time in Boston this year.
Yeah.
And so when they told me about the merger and I got to know them and kind of their vision for the combined company and what they were thinking about from a board construct perspective, I think it just made a lot of sense. I really think, again, for when it comes to mergers, it needs to be a 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
And I really saw that with this team. I think combined, they have such a dominant position in the market, and so the opportunity to kind of help them grow into a much larger company that needs the kind of governance and discipline that now comes. They were both kind of scrappy startups, but now they're a dominant player.
Yeah.
And so I think just my experience can be helpful to them, and I was happy I was happy when they asked me, and it's been great.
So what does Synteq look like going forward? Because we have like this Bitcoin mining brokerage service that's obviously highly in demand, but then there's also like the HPC side stuff that I'm to understand is like growing for them as well. And of course there's all the other like electrical infrastructure that they buy and sell all the time. If you're in their channel, it's like
which is great.
Sale.
And and that all of that electrical, kind of complementary or peripheral infrastructure matters a lot in both businesses.
Yeah.
So that there's a lot of crossover there.
Definitely.
I think, not to transition back to Hut, but I do think Hut had the luxury of when we got into data centers as early as we did, and you can see they're now starting to actually invest in building out kind of bridging technology where it's infrastructure that looks and feels more like a traditional Bitcoin mining in that it's much lower CapEx, but supporting HPC.
Okay.
And certainly that was always my belief that we would be forced to drive a convergence somewhere in that chain, because for the new AI clustered workloads, it just doesn't make sense to pay 10 million a megawatt when in Bitcoin mining we can do it for 400K a megawatt. I'm not saying the answer is 400K, but it's certainly less than 10 million.
Yeah.
And so I think Hut's uniquely positioned right now to be driving to find that middle with an edge of having lived in both worlds for a long time. They're not new into HPC. They were the first there. And so similar for a Synteq. I mean, they've been in both worlds, and the team's done a good job of hiring people from HPC now. And there are so many synergies, and I think we're just going to continue to see this kind of proliferation of people doing both and needing an infrastructure provider that can service both sides of the business, which again, Synteq is the only one positioned in the middle.
Yeah. Let's stay with the HPC thing for a second. I'm glad you brought that back up, because Hut had been doing that through a bunch of your initiatives to buy these sites and run them. And I remember talking with one of your guys' team members. I don't know if he's still there, but he talked about like the vision of turning some of the Texas sites into HPC workloads, which to my knowledge now are still mining Bitcoin, but perhaps in the future they turn to HPC. And he expressed at the time, the idea was, we have these sites for cheap, the energy's cheap, and we can build pretty reliable infrastructure here that's not going to be your hyperscaler, Microsoft, Google size. It's going to be underneath that, but it's going to come online when there's excess demand during to land the plane for a view, or a big Netflix fight was the other night, and people were really tuning in for it, and Hut 8 would boot up its GPUs for that. How true is that vision that there is a place for that lower scale sort of infrastructure?
I think it's very true, because right now, for all things HPC, GPU based, AI based, whatever, they're all running basically, I'm oversimplifying, but on 10 million a megawatt infrastructure. There is an opportunity to scale that down for certain workloads. And there's a big wide open market when you solve for that.
Okay. Yeah, I love
that's for me.
That's the world.
Growing up in infrastructure my whole life and living in both worlds, that the holy grail for the next big thing in infrastructure is there.
Okay. See, that's the thing that always gets my alarm bells going, because you always, and we had this on the last conversation with Rusty and Larry and Perry, was,
oh yeah, they're right in that world too.
They're building out this middle layer, this into investors or people who don't know about this world. It's hard to look at it and trust it. Yeah. Because it's these are two very, very different things.
They are.
But how does the infrastructure for that go together? The energy makes sense. For the most part.
Yeah. Energy and power distribution.
Yeah.
But also operating teams.
Okay.
A data center, a traditional data center, you need a network operation center. You need, people looking at the sites 24/7. You need somebody monitoring security at the sites 24/7.
Yeah.
All of that is applicable to both worlds.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of synergies you can actually drive through shared services on the operation side, but then also kind of front of house, right? HR, finance, all of that stuff. You can spread the costs over both. But HPC, the infrastructure is where the trick and the answer lies.
Yeah.
But as I say, someone's going to solve for it. There's a big wide open market in the middle.
Okay.
And the demand is there and only going to increase.
In the competitive world of Bitcoin mining, one name stands out: CleanSpark, America's Bitcoin miner. At CleanSpark, efficiency isn't just a goal, it's our standard. Our sophisticated facilities are built and led by expert teams who care about Bitcoin and the communities we work in. Scale, we've mastered it. Our large-scale operations have set us apart in the industry as examples of community-oriented building. Our track record speaks for itself. We navigate the complexities of the new economy with precision and with skill, continuously achieving operational milestones. Curious about how we do it? We invite you to discover the story behind CleanSpark's success at cleanspark.com.
What kind of infrastructure are we talking about for that? Is it going to be a container thing, or is it going to be more on the server level, where even Hut 8 had that new solution with Bitmain? And we talked about that on the last recording, where it's you can make stuff look the same, and functionally you don't have to train your staff on two different systems, but they're doing different things.
Completely.
They're going to need different energy solutions for both. The power density is obviously drastically different. The workloads are very different. So on a physical level, if I was going to hold what that solution would be, is it a container? Is it? Well,
I don't know. I mean, we've talked. In the traditional data center world, we would talk about edge data centers. So, a small data center living near a connectivity hub or something in urban centers where you can't have a big traditional data center, but you need some sort of compute at source.
Okay.
And that would be in some sort of containerized solution, or, a smaller purpose-built enclosure of some kind.
Okay.
And I don't know the answer. If I knew the Holy Grail, I would already be front running it.
That's the new startup, right?
Yeah. No. I don't know the answer. And it's probably both. It's probably a little bit of, there's probably a container solution out there. And there are a ton of companies working on that.
Yeah.
And then it's probably also some purpose built, but stripped down from a just less UPS, less generators, less, because a lot of that 10 million is spent on uptime. So if you figure out what's the trade-off in uptime for a reduction in CapEx, and you just find that middle.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Again, like the last show we did, I talked about that. I kept asking, clarifying questions around that, because it does seem like a lot of the big Bitcoin miners, and I won't name names, but I think everyone who listens to the show knows, they keep putting like these solutions out there that don't really exist, or they're like trying to make products like shoehorn into this category, and they don't. And then we talk to people who are experts like yourself, and they're like, that doesn't work. But yet you still see it, and you still see it sold to investors, and
I mean, devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And I think for Hut, it was just such a clean story. We bought an operating business that had, I think at the time we did the transaction, 400 enterprise customers, full team, full complement. Like there's no denying that's a real functioning business. Yeah. That's not debatable.
Yeah.
And then how you use that expertise and grow it in-house and evolve and find that sweet spot in the middle. That's the whole point. That's where the magic will be.
So back to Synteq, as chair of the board, what does that role kind of look like day to day? And then overarching, is a strategy play, I'm assuming, since you have such a background in, well, many different things, but HPC.
You're aging me well. The role of any good board member is nose in, hands out. I'm not there to be part of the day-to-day operations of the business, but I'm absolutely there to help, whether it's my Rolodex or sanity checks or strategy. Obviously, I'm connected to key hires and financials and large deals, large transactions, anything in the ecosystem, which is honestly, that's where all the fun is. But as far as day-to-day operating, only if the team calls and wants me to help with something for some reason, which I'm always happy to make the time to do. It's, again, it was really, really good team, super good people. We were able to all get together and kick off in Nashville when the merger closed around, in the middle of Bitcoin Nashville, and it was awesome.
Yeah. That's nice. Chair of the board, no day-to-day responsibilities. That's what I'm going for in life.
I'm oversimplifying, as I do. Well, it just makes it easier.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about the competition in the market right now. And then I'm also going to ask some like closing questions in a second, put you in the hot seat since you're not a CEO at a publicly traded miner. But there's lots of questions we want to ask.
But don't follow me for investment advice.
Yeah, true. Except for that hut bag. So for the current market landscape, we're hitting all-time highs. Hash
Another
prices,
one overnight last night.
I don't know. It's a good time to be in the Bitcoin business. 6 months ago, you wouldn't have said that. Well, no, 6 months ago was pretty good. Last summer was terrible.
Well, hash price is still a problem, but anyway.
Hash price is terrible. Infrastructure seems to be slowly being bid up. We just put a piece out this morning in our newsletter talking about how it's a seller's market now.
Interesting.
Like, there's Doge miners are actually the winners right now. Like, you can buy an L7 for like $7,000, $8,000, which is crazy to think about that. But for the mining landscape, how much are you paying attention to it as opposed to just like kind of the overarching stock prices, which you kind of mentioned earlier? And then what is your like tea leaf reading about like the next few months, given that hash price is so low while Bitcoin price is surging?
Yeah. I try to remember 2020, Bitcoin started running and the miners didn't until really beginning of 21.
Yeah.
So my hope, which isn't a strategy, but it is my hope, is that it's just the normal lag.
Yeah.
It feels like they're not moving the way they should be given where Bitcoin price action is, but it's actually following historical norms.
Yeah.
So my hope is that they start running the way they should be. Q1, Q2 next year should be really, really good.
Okay. So we have tons of different miner plays right now in the space. And as like a former CEO and someone who like is paying attention to the space so much, what do you like? What are you saying that you like? And what do you not like?
What I'm most excited about is actually not what's happening in the public space. I mean, I love the publics. I play a bunch of different publics. I obviously have a big hut bag.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get into MicroStrategy in like August of 2020.
Nice.
And that has been by far the best performing stock in my portfolio. So yeah, I also obviously just like straight Bitcoin, the underlying. But where I'm getting super excited as far as like the next wave of innovation in this space, outside of what we talked about of the holy grail between mining and HPC, is really with abandoned wells, flare gas, like driving much, much more deeply into the energy narrative, which I think we've glossed over the last number of years, but we're starting to see some really, really interesting projects that are much more sophisticated, partnering with oil and gas. I love what I'm seeing come out of that space. And that's where I'm spending kind of personal time and looking at how do I play a little bit more into the more pure energy side of the transaction.
Because the last time we left that was 21, 22. There was lots of people talking about Twitter. It was going to save Bitcoin, save the world, which was great. Just to get the attention. And now everything's pivoted to the AI HPC with mining. It seems like mining always has like a narrative with it.
It does.
It can't just be mining is awesome. Besides miners who think that.
Amanda does a good job of always just keeping that pure play mining is awesome message.
She does.
She doesn't like when I dilute around it with my stack and my HPC. But she's doing some really interesting work on the energy side too, in some of her advisory, which I do think is probably the next area where we'll see investment going into privates. It's going to be privates that have a really, really good waste energy story.
Okay. So for that waste energy side, that's all just going to be private investments, right? Like there's not
for now. I only see privates, but I see really interesting privates.
Okay. I always like to land the plane on that sort of topic because we always get questions like, how do I invest in that? It's like you YouTube commenter will probably never know how to invest in that. It's hard to know. You have to know the right people.
You do have to know the right people. You've got to be connected to the right teams. Like the opportunities for privates generally come through the banking system. I don't even know what advice I would give on that. I mean, maybe your viewers can DM me and I'll find out what the answer is. Yeah. There should be a way for them to play some of these really interesting privates for people that are sophisticated and know. I just don't have the answer on how to do that. I've only been plugged into that world the last few years myself.
There's some cool Ethereum projects around like VC investing on that side. Like Echo's one. It's kind of like Angel's List, but for new age tech projects. So there's some things on that side of the world. I can only bring that up to you since like Hut was actually involved with Ethereum mining and all that. You bring that up to someone else, they'd be aghast for me bringing that up.
I'm shocked. I didn't know that the Doge miners were running like that.
Yeah, that's
new information for me.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to pay attention to all the mining on the mining pod. Anything that you'd like to say to public CEOs now that you're kind of outside of that sphere? I mean, you are a CEO, but now you're just, you're former, you kind of have like this, you've transcended to the next level, if you will.
I don't know. I expect I'll be a public company CEO again before long, but I like the public world.
Okay.
I like it is complicated. It's got a lot. You're taking a lot on. Yeah. It is a 24/7 job. You do have to think about every word that comes out of your mouth. But I think the space needs authentic leadership. I think that's the most important thing is to, do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
Be an open, honest, transparent leader, build a good team around you. It's critically important. And I think the investors really resonate and gravitate to that kind of leadership.
Okay. So that's encouragement for the current class right now.
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to, it's all about trust.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about your startup now as we're kind of like closing out. You mentioned the name earlier. I'm blanking on it.
ULYS. So short for Ulysses,
Okay.
ULYS. If you look me up on socials,
Yeah.
it is updated, and our logo is actually this really beautiful U that right now I have it's a rainbow, but it's going to be all different colors over time. And it really signifies that we're building something that's entirely about the user experience. It is a fintech app for the crypto worlds, specifically targeting DeFi.
Okay.
Because one of the big problems we still have as a space is not having a really user-friendly experience for people looking to come in and do things that are a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're building. We're building something that's user-focused, that's curated, that's plain language, but opens up the world of opportunity that you can't get through centralized exchanges.
Okay. So it's an exchange, personalized app.
It's all based on self-custody.
Okay.
Around the office, we're calling it the killer app for DeFi.
Nice.
So we'll see if we can live up to that.
Okay. So it's going to have a bunch of different things within it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll be able to, from directly within the app, you'll be able to navigate the entire ecosystem.
Okay. And what does the next 6 months look like for you for that, do you think?
Busy.
Yeah.
We're super lucky. Our chief product officer, deep expertise in this space, most recently at Coinbase. And we're targeting general availability for the launch of the product in the US in March.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're launching private beta after US Thanksgiving. We do have a waitlist started online for people that want early access to the public beta, which will be in February.
Okay. And now you're learning all those sort of
rules,
like the money transfer laws.
So I've always I've always played in that space a little bit, but been broadly a maxi. So it is a bit of a new world for me to kind of open up my horizons outside of the world of Bitcoin. But I'm having a lot of fun.
So the next show will be an ETH show.
It will be.
I'm sure yours.
Or Solana.
Yeah.
Or Base. Who knows?
No, we're going to keep it real in the show. Cool. Well, I think that kind of wraps up the questions I've really had. I appreciate you taking some of the harder ones on. Anything before we walk off here?
No, thanks for having me. It's always great to see you, Will.
Awesome. Thanks.